Almost every single person is incorrect about the latest outrage around Dave Chappelle's latest special, The Closer, on Netflix. And I will tell you why they're incorrect in a moment, my friends. If you want to support me, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Share this content as much as you can. It really helps me. Now let us proceed into my analysis. My friends, unless you are living under a rock, you're just unaware of culture these days, Dave Chappelle has gotten a lot of flack over his recent Netflix special called The Closer. Indeed, the cultural conversation rages along about this very incendiary, some would say, special that culminates in what many suspect to be the end of Mr. Chappelle's time at Netflix, although that is not a confirmed fact. So almost every single person on the left is angry about this, and many people who work within Netflix's own ranks are also angry about this. Not too long ago, there was an employee strike, a protest outside of Netflix's LA office, where many employees who happened to be identified as trans, gay, or allies went and they protested the inclusion of Dave Chappelle and his harmful rhetoric into Netflix's canon of films. Indeed, also several LGBTQ organizations have also struck by Mr. Chappelle's special. GLAAD, the LGBTQ media advocacy organization, has said that Chappelle's special is now synonymous with anti-LGBTQ language and bigotry. John Blake, who wrote an op-ed for CNN, even accused Mr. Chappelle of dishonoring black comedians who came before him, who, according to Mr. Blake's words, made Chappelle's career possible. He is honoring them because he's making jokes about marginalized groups that many of these black comedians supposedly belong to. Richard Pryor, for example, the great Richard Pryor, was a bisexual man. And so by making these kind of jokes, Chappelle is somehow dishonoring those people. And before I get down to why I think everyone's missing the point here, before I get down to this, my friends, let's understand something. Mr. Chappelle, nor anyone else, has an obligation to carry around the weight of institutions or people who came before him. My friends, we are not held to account for others who may have been in our likeness. Because, my friends, ultimately, everyone is in our likeness because we are all fundamentally human beings vested with the same seed and physiology of human equality and rationality and sociability that makes us human beings. So, by that logic, we all have an obligation to everyone, and there are some people who believe this corrupted idea. Peter Singer believes that he's a famous Australian philosopher, that if you have the means to, you are obligated to care about all poverty in all way, regardless of your relationship to those people. But the moment you say that, my friends, is the moment you actually destroy the foundational principle of relationships, and you make all relationships predicated upon a single value, which none of us in our own lives may have any connection to. How can I have an obligation to you if I don't have a connection to you? How can I have an obligation to you if I don't have anything concrete upon which to lay that obligation? If I have entered into a contract with you, even an informal one, where you give me $5 and I'm supposed to pay you back later, that's an obligation. If I understand the nature of humanity, or even if I don't understand it, I understand that I cannot violate anything, your bodily autonomy, I cannot violate your liberty or your property. I have an obligation to refrain from infringing upon your liberty. These are the nature of obligations, but yet the left has kind of usurped obligation from its very concrete terms, and they have put it in this abstract idea where obligation becomes not about actual concrete relationships or actions that you undertook in the past. It becomes about understanding and adhering to group mentalities and being connected to a history of people that you may not even have been related to in any other way outside of one feature, and the feature that they are using to connect Chappelle to those black comedians is his race. Not his style, but his race. You don't have an obligation to someone because of their race. Anyway, moving on. Many conservatives have embarked to defend Chappelle by saying that he is the latest example of woke outrage gone run amok. And this is a cheap take, my friends. It's cheap because there are many examples of woke outrage run amok. There are plenty of examples of woke outrage run amok. Whether it be J.K. Rowling, who Chappelle mentioned in his special, which I'll get to in a moment, whether it be whoever it is, there are many different examples. There are so many examples that it becomes a tired line to repeat this over and over again, because you're reasserting a problem that many of us, or many people I've heard on the right commenting about this, have no solution for. Here's what I like to say. I like to say that if I'm not the answer to the problem, I don't really need to hear the problem. And if you're going to talk to me about woke outrage run amok, a problem which is invested into American institutions, then I don't think I'm the answer to that problem. Or maybe I am. But if I am, talk about it in a way that can help me understand that. Many people on the right who are defending Chappelle are not doing that. My friends, the outrage over Chappelle's special has absolutely nothing to do with him. The anger stems from a conglomerate of philosophically impotent minds who don't understand the relationship between truth and language, the relationship between communication and language. And instead, they have interpreted language to be something that affirms them, not a vessel for communication in general. What do I mean by this? My friends, what Dave Chappelle does is something we call comedy. Comedy is simply an outgrowth of the principle of communication. And the principle of communication is inherently tied to language. This is true in almost all circumstances. This is true with deaf people who require American Sign Language. This is true of children or toddlers who begin developing words they speak at a very young age. This is true of almost every single civilization. They've all had some kind of language by which they communicate with people, and there has been a rich human intellectual tradition which has refined and fine-tuned our language to adapt to the modern world and to make it even clearer. The kind of English or language that we have during 2021 is not the kind of language we had during even 1920. There were different things. Well, it's the same kind of language, but it has a different form, right? There are different things, different ways of communicating, different terms that our language has had to adapt to, and that is natural. But what is not natural is when language is cast in political terms. And when language is cast in political terms, you get a sort of narrowing of the broad range of acceptability, and that comes with the death of truth. So, my friends, I say this for a few reasons. Number one, Netflix has cast itself within the terms of wokeness. Netflix itself, actually, and this is what actually a Slate article said. I was reading this on Slate. It says the following: Netflix has been tremendously effective at getting users to view their attachment to the service as part of their identity, and to respond to criticism of Netflix as if they're being personally attacked. But it also means that they expect more from Netflix, including that it stands for something in a way that no company of its size really can. They go on to compare HBO and how they have Bill Maher and how Bill Maher is offensive. Point is this: Netflix has accepted these terms, and Netflix has tried to ingratiate itself towards the sort of trans crowd for a very long time. And the problem is, when you accept the terms of false enlightenment leftism, you also become subjugated to their expectations. And the moment you deviate from their expectations is the moment you are seen as the enemy. And that quotation came from an article called "Netflix is Not Your Friend." And this has been the sense of many leftist intellectuals and writers over the past few weeks dealing with the Chappelle situation. So back to my thing about communication and knowledge. My friends, comedy has been used for so many decades as a tool to communicate certain ideas in a way that can get us to be disarmingly aroused by them. So, for example, when you make someone laugh, when you reach, because all of us have humor in our soul, when you make someone laugh, you can make someone even forget that they actually like the thing they're laughing at. You can make someone forget they actually are in support of what you just mocked. And this is a method that many writers throughout history who have utilized comedy as a tool have used to make points. Geoffrey Chaucer, for example, in The Canterbury Tales, one of my favorite plays, he utilized comedy as a means of poking fun at various institutions, especially religious hypocrisy in the church during his day, in an age where that kind of was actually a potential death sentence. And Geoffrey Chaucer surely offended many people with his characters and their archetypes. He had one character called the Wife of Bath. The Wife of Bath was a gap-toothed, large, Wagnerian almost woman who proclaimed to be a Christian and quoted scripture and yet leaned on her own experience, not the experience of God, leaned on her own experience and had like 5 or 6 husbands. But again, she was a Christian, so it was okay. Then the summoner, another character in Canterbury Tales, was this individual who was supposed to be the bridge between the human being and heaven, was supposed to allow people to forgive their sins, kind of like a priest during confession, and yet here he is taking bribes and other kinds of indulgences to give people a pass to be corrupt. Chaucer pointed out so much things through the lens of comedy that were actually true. Comedy, my friends, tends to be the bridge between what is humorous and what is conceivably true. Now, what is humorous can sometimes lead itself to the absurd, to that which is not necessarily true in effect, but that which is conceivably true. So when Dave Chappelle says in his special that trans people hate him, and he's looking out to the crowd to see if either Adam's apples and Knuckles are going to be after him. So he's obviously being absurd, perhaps even in a little bit of a outrageous way, but he is bridging the gap between humor and truth by examining how rabid some of these, not all of these, some of these left-wing trans activists are in destroying him, and how much that has caused furor around his work. Again, he's doing it in a very crude way, a way that I personally would not do, but he's doing it in a manner that is effective to the senses. Comedy engages all the senses, which is why Chaucer had that woman, that wife of Bath, that religious hypocrite, as such an outrageous depiction of a woman, because she is so outrageous in her actions, and the actions lead directly to her appearance. My friends, if we shut our ears and shut our minds to comedy, especially comedy that offends us, we will never be able to understand these very important knowledge-building relationships. When Chappelle says that gender is a fact, and this is one of the many quotes that got many people angry, and that we all had to pass through the legs of a woman to get here, he is simply making a statement about simple science. Having said that, he is doing so in a way that many interpret as invalidating to their existence, and therefore they reject it. But unfortunately, my friends, the truth is resolute. And the truth is simply this: gender is most certainly a fact, but what is also a fact is that there are some people who do not identify with the sex or gender that they biologically belong to, and perhaps there is something that we can do in society, or as individuals rather, to not interfere with those people, and to even build relationships with those people. I know many trans folks myself, and I am sure to respect their pronouns and respect their perception of themselves, because really, it is none of my business. It is not my place to disrupt their perception of themselves. Ultimately, it is them who will be dealing with that throughout the rest of their life, not me. It is only my duty to be the best friend and the best person that I can be. Having said that, just because I want to do that does not mean that I go against verifiable truth. Even trans folks were born of a woman. But also, I don't understand why so many folks tire to prove that Chappelle saying that gender is a fact is an insult to transgenders, when in all reality, transgenderism is predicated upon the fact of gender to distinguish itself from the gender that one is given at birth or by society or perceived by society to the gender that one themselves takes the mantle and validates through their own experiences. So if we are to actually believe transgenderism, and if we are to believe the laws of logic and laws of syllogistic certainty, then we would also be led to the conclusion that gender must be a fact for transgenderism to be conceptually sound, because if gender is not a fact, how in the world do you get transgenderism? You do not. Now, this may be taken as an insult by some non-binary folks, but that is a very different statement than saying that Chappelle is invalidating or trying to erase the lives of transgenders by saying the foundation upon which you distinguish yourself as transgenders is factually correct. How can there be any more affirming statement than that? Humor, my friend, is not there to coddle you. Humor is there to push you in some way, shape, or form towards a critical self-evaluation of your own preconceptions and the general preconceptions of society. This is what Shakespeare did, this is what Chaucer did, and this is what Dave Chappelle is doing. Now, personally, my friends, I don't find Dave Chappelle very funny. I don't think his comedy is all that to rage about. But what I do think is that people like Dave Chappelle are emissaries of the principle, the sort of concrete relationship between humor and truth, and they are necessary to get all of us to take a quick look at ourselves, a quick look at our ideologies, and to see, okay, Is that good? Is that good? Is that good? Does this make sense? Does this cohere with the law of logic? Is this sensible? And if we end up saying no, or if we end up getting angry, perhaps the problem is not with Chappelle or with Chaucer or Shakespeare. Perhaps the problem is with ourselves. Perhaps the problem is with our inability to critically, and even in a humorous way as well, entertain certain ideas that make us uncomfortable. But guess what? As John Stuart Mill said in On Liberty, language is that tool, I'm paraphrasing, which trades error for truth, falsehood for truth, and allows posterity to live better. If we're ever going to live better by understanding our world, we must first take a laugh at our world, take a laugh at ourselves, and reevaluate what all that stuff means to us and what it might implicate for the rest of society and the rest of the world. And in tradition with Chappelle's special, perhaps it's incumbent upon all of us not to get angry at Chappelle, even if we disagree with him, but to reevaluate what he says and see if it pairs with truth. If it does, maybe that is grounds for more questioning and not simple outrage. Think on it. My friends, if you love me, patreon.com/officialcwatson or PayPal officialcwatson@gmail.com, or you can get me on Locals, christianwatson@locals.com, or you can join my Discord server, which is in the comment section down below. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.